Well, now, put the words e-scooter into a new search engine, Google, and here are some of the results from the last week alone. 2 15-year-old girls seriously injured in Liverpool when their e-scooter ploughed into a car. A middle-aged man in South London knocked unconscious when an e-scooter hit him on the pavement. These are pictures, by the way, from Bradford, which I'll refer to later. In North London, a 28-year-old man was left in a critical condition after being struck by a car in a hit-and-run. A teenager in Coventry with serious injuries after colliding with a vehicle. The courts were busy too. E-scooter drivers were charged with drink driving by prosecutors in Cambridgeshire and Norfolk. A 21-year-old was found to be 3 times over the legal limit for alcohol on his e-scooter in Ramsgate. He was arrested as he rode past the local police station. There were police crackdowns on illegal e-scooter use in Essex, Sussex, Lancashire and Dorset. Abroad, in Norway, a curfew was introduced, presumably to stop people hiring e-scooters when drunk. Closer to home, in my home city of Bradford, run those pictures, an e-scooter rider was seen on the motorway slip road trying to join the M606. Well, you've seen them already. All of that this week alone. This year, 3 men have died in Britain on e-scooters. 200 crimes have been committed on e-scooters in the first 4 months of this year, up from 4 in the same period last year. The Met Police alone have confiscated more than 2,000 illegal e-scooters. That's obviously one side of the story. E-scooters are good for the environment and may ease congestion, let it be said. They're cheap and COVID-friendly. And they're, for many people, a decent way of getting around. Well, we're joined in time, we hope, by the Labour peer, Lord Berkeley, and e-scooter fan, Michael Quintana. Michael, thanks ever so much for your time this evening. I genuinely did that as a sort of inquiring exercise this afternoon. Just Google searched a number of news stories about e-scooters in this week alone. There's, 65, 66 million people in this country. I suppose we can talk about what proportions that amount to. Maybe it's not too high for a new form of transport. Nonetheless, people will be struck by the sharpness of the increase in problems with these scooters.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. The sharpness and increase in problems is probably because of the sharpness and increase of usage, which, to be honest, like any device, any tool, any electronics, when we look at the internet, when that came out, the whole idea was, well, amazing tool. Then everyone got on. There was problems, and we found ways to get around those, ways to support shops, put in safety measures. And that's the same thing with micromobility, in particular with e-scooters. So again, you know how things go with something that's novel. People are going to flood to it. They're going to try it. They're going to race it. They want to play with it. And, that's fine. We need to address that in the same way we address knives. They're useful, but at the same time, we need to have measures in place to keep them safe. And it's the same thing here with micromobility. So some of the problems that you're showing, we stand fully against. We don't want anybody on motorways. It's like watching a mobility scooter go on the motorway. You think, wait, that doesn't make sense. And those cases make headlines, make TV, make memes and everything on the internet. But the whole point is that shouldn't be happening. And we're all for elements of regulation within reason. We don't want to nanny state the whole thing, but at the same time, we feel like we look at the safety. They're inherently safe overall. You're always going to run into certain issues, like any, mode of transport. But overall, they're inherently safe as a device, and they're only going to get better with use.
I'm guessing there's a lot there to agree with, Michael, unquestionably, but there'll also be some people saying, and again, looking as I was this afternoon, there was a lot of footage of kids, teenagers, who, you say they're inherently safe. There are no airbags, there is no superstructure around you as there is with a car. And also, their accessibility, which on so many levels is a great thing, also means that a teenager with no training, with no license, no road sense, can get on these things. And the internet from this country already is awash with footage of kids on scooters, emerging out of roads, bang, car, serious injuries. There is a difference.
Yeah, and I totally agree. Something that might give it perspective. By the way, thank you for having me on this sort of platform, because often you end up with 10 seconds of trying to make a point, and then it's hard to get it through. If you look at e-scooters, the best way to equate them, and this is through our own research from other governments like Australia, Estonia, several other countries, is on average, they're not faster than your average cyclist. You're looking at between 12.5, sometimes up to 15.5 miles per hour. And that's your average cyclist through Richmond Park or anywhere else, often even going faster than that. But it is about a balance of context. When you see a new scooter, it's new, there's an accident. Of course, we're going to point our cameras and headlines towards that. But we also can't ignore, why did that accident happen? Can we do things to prevent that? And some of these measures that we recommend, if you go to rideables.org, sorry, I know it's a bit of a plug, but it's relevant. We have our policy recommendation. We've sat with Parliament at roundtables, and we put our recommendation forward, which is things like helmets. When you ride a bike, you wear a helmet. Same with an e-scooter. Stay off the pavements. Why should anybody be on a pavement with a bike or an e-scooter? Stay off. France has addressed it with, stay off the pavements, but if you're on, there's a maximum speed limit. And we're more than happy to say, forget the speed limit, just get off the pavement. If an officer sees somebody on the pavement, pull them aside. They deserve a penalty or a fine or a warning, depending on the circumstance.
Michael, I introduced you in my introduction there as a fan. I'm guessing you're a rider as well, and probably have been a rider for quite a while. What's the evolving situation out there? Are people more respectful of e-scooter users? Is it the reverse, that motorists feel that you're eating into their precious space on the road? What's the vibe?
Yeah, so both a fan and a user, and also on the professional side as well. The vibe is probably the equivalent of when you see a cyclist in Lycra. A lot of people look at a Lycra-clad cyclist as they're driving by, rushing to work, and they're thinking, get off the bloody road, do this, move there, why are you in the middle of the lane? And the reality is, a lot of these things come from perception. Cyclists ride in the middle of the road because sometimes the bike lanes aren't the best. There's a reason. Sometimes it's just, they're not being the nicest person either. We really want to promote the safe conduct and regulation of scooters. And if you look at them again as a bike, you're looking at them to say, stay off the pavements, stay off the motorways, bring in regulations. We're happy to consider, things like, like minimum age minimum age restrictions, looking at potential, insurance, even though technically you're not looking at creating any more damage than you would if you're riding at a clip on a bicycle. But we're happy to use these sort of, policies and regulations to create a more friendly introduction of this new technology. And
Michael,
again,
Michael, just hold that position for a second. You mentioned regulation. We've been joined now by the Labour peer, Lord Berkeley, to reflect on how legislation might be framed in the upper house and elsewhere. I mean, part of the problem, it will seem to me, and I imagine to quite a few of our viewers, is that a lot of what Michael says is absolute good sense. It rather relies upon people complying with any rules that are laid down. And out there on the wire, in what appears to be in certain parts of the country, the Wild West of unregulated scooter use, that's unlikely to happen, Lord Berkeley.
I'm sorry, it's difficult to make the contact. I think we need to take a step back on this, because bicycles and scooters have many things in common. You're quite exposed, you're flexible, you can take exercise, it's very convenient, but you can get in the way of cars and you can get in the way of pedestrians. And you've got three different types of road users in a comparatively confined space. Now, I think the answer is to say, let's make them as similar to cycling as you can. Because the only reason they allowed electric bikes is because you have to put a little bit of power in before the electricity clocks in. With a scooter, you don't have to, but you could have to. You could give it a little push. And then you end up with something which is quiet, so you can go up behind people and frighten them, but electric cars do that too. And so I think the answer is to try and educate people to behave as if they're on a bicycle, have a speed limit if you like. Same we should have speed limits for on bicycles, but I'm told that there's going to be 1 million scooters owned in this country by the end of this year. In theory, most of them be illegal. And how the hell are the police going to enforce anything there? And we're going to go around making more and more detailed legislation. I think the answer is, and I believe this is happening in Holland quite a lot, is that cyclists ring a bell if they're coming up behind somebody who might be frightened. Why do we have bells on scooters? And have the same legislation or lack of legislation that applies to cycling, insurance, helmets, whatever we like. But let's not have a fourth category of road users, because it's going to get too complicated and people will just ignore it all, I feel. I think we've got to educate people.
Michael Quintana, let's just give you the final word, and brief if we can. Isn't part of the problem here we could probably do with a moratorium of some length on the sales, the private sales, rentals, different thing, private sales of e-scooters, because the truth is that e-scooters have been sold to people on the premise they can only use them privately on private land. Then they're just not doing that, are they?
No, exactly right. Basically, some other countries like the US, obviously where I'm from, New York, I think did that, where they said, look, we're going to put an amnesty while we step back and actually look at the safety records, look at the overall, viability of the technology. And I think we could do the same. Like, I'm sorry, Lord, I didn't catch your name. Lord Berkeley, with all due respect, I really appreciate everything you said. It all comes down to education. The novelty will wear off. And when that wears off, we're going to be looking at typical similar usage that you get with a bicycle. And we need to look at it and regulate it and approach it in a very similar way. Again, the pedestrian issue, stay off the pavement, and we should hopefully be okay.
Gentlemen, I'm afraid we're out of time, but we appreciate your time this evening. Thanks both very much indeed.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.